The dust devil that kicked up outside the barn that September morning in 1878 should have warned Vincent Garrett that his life was about to change forever. But he was too busy cursing his broken fence line to pay attention to omens. The rolling grasslands of his ranch stretched out for 300 acres near Alta, Wyoming territory, and every inch of it needed more hands than he could afford. His foreman had run off with a gambling debt 2 weeks prior, taking the best horse and Vincent's trust in hiring decisions with him. Now here he stood, 26 years old with calloused hands and an aching back, wondering how he would manage the autumn roundup alone. The figure that appeared on the horizon rode a tired mare that looked ready to collapse. Vincent shaded his eyes against the morning sun, watching as the rider approached slowly, deliberately, as if conserving every ounce of energy. Most drifters passed right by his property, heading for the larger cattle operations or the mining camps further north. This one seemed intent on reaching his front gate. As the distance closed, Vincent realized with some surprise that the rider was a woman. She sat straight in the saddle despite the obvious exhaustion in her posture, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid beneath a worn hat. Her clothes were dusty from travel, a simple cotton shirt and split riding skirt that had seen better days. When she reached the fence, she dismounted with careful grace, holding the reins loosely as she met his gaze directly. "I am looking for work," she said without preamble. Her voice carried an edge of desperation masked by determination. "Any honest work you have. I can cook, clean, mend fences, handle livestock. I learn quickly and I do not complain." Vincent found himself staring into her eyes, a deep brown that held stories he suddenly wanted to know. There was something there beyond the obvious need, a quiet strength that pulled at something in his chest. He cleared his throat, trying to focus on the practical concerns rather than the unexpected flutter in his stomach. "This is a working ranch, miss. The labor is hard and the hours are long. I cannot pay much, and I have no other hands right now to help share the burden." He paused, knowing he should probably send her on her way. A woman alone on a ranch with a single man would set tongues wagging in Alta, but something in those honest eyes made him hesitate. "What is your name?" "Theresa Vance," she replied, "and I am not afraid of hard work. I grew up on a farm in Missouri before we lost it to the bank. I have been traveling west for 3 months looking for a fresh start. Your ranch is the first place that has looked like it might need someone as much as I need somewhere to be." The honesty in her words struck him harder than any sales pitch could have. Vincent ran a hand through his dark hair, already knowing he was about to make a decision that would likely complicate his life in ways he could not foresee. "I have a small cabin out back where my foreman stayed before he left. It needs cleaning, but it is sturdy and private. You can stay there. I will pay you $15 a month plus meals, and we will start with a trial period. If it does not work out for either of us, no hard feelings. Does that sound fair?" The relief that washed over Theresa's face was immediate and profound. "More than fair. Thank you, Mr. Garrett. You will not regret this." But as Vincent showed her to the small cabin and watched her move her meager belongings inside, he suspected he might regret it in ways that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with the way his heart had started beating faster the moment she looked at him. That first day set the tone for the weeks that followed. Theresa proved herself as capable as she had claimed, rising before dawn to help with the morning chores. She learned the rhythms of the ranch quickly, seeming to anticipate what needed doing before Vincent even asked. She mended the broken fence line with steady hands, cooked meals that reminded him of home before his parents had passed, and handled his cattle with a gentle confidence that put the animals at ease. Vincent found himself watching her more than he should. the way she pushed loose strands of hair from her face when she was concentrating, the quiet humming she did while working in the kitchen, the genuine smile she gave when one of the calves finally took to bottle feeding after days of resistance. He told himself it was simply appreciation for good help, but he knew he was lying. 3 weeks into her employment, a late September storm rolled in with little warning. Vincent was out checking the north pasture when the sky opened up, sheets of rain turning the ground to mud within minutes. He rode back as fast as he dared, concerned about the livestock and the barn roof that had been meaning to repair. Theresa met him at the barn, already soaked through, helping guide the horses inside. Her shirt clung to her frame and her braid had come partially undone, but she was focused entirely on getting the animals to safety. "The cattle in the east field," she called over the thunder. "They will be fine. They know to head for the shelter of the trees." Vincent secured his horse and turned to help her close the barn doors against the wind. Together they pushed against the heavy wood, their shoulders touching as they forced the doors shut and dropped the bar in place. In the sudden relative quiet of the barn, with rain drumming on the roof above them, Vincent became acutely aware of how close they were standing. Theresa looked up at him, water dripping from her hair, her chest rising and falling from exertion. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them and the electricity that sparked in the small space between their bodies. "We should get to the house," Vincent said, his voice rougher than he intended. "You need to get warm and dry." They ran through the downpour to the main house, laughing despite themselves as they splashed through rapidly forming puddles. Inside, Vincent grabbed towels from the cupboard while Theresa stood dripping on the wooden floor, suddenly looking uncertain. "I should go back to the cabin," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "In this storm. The path will be a river by now." Vincent handed her a towel, being careful not to let their fingers touch because he was not sure what he would do if they did. "Stay here until it passes. I will make coffee." As the storm raged outside, they sat at his kitchen table with steaming mugs between them, the silence stretching but not uncomfortable. Vincent found himself studying her profile in the lamplight, the elegant line of her neck, the strength in her hands wrapped around the ceramic. "Why did you really leave Missouri?" he asked quietly. Theresa was silent for a long moment, staring into her coffee as if it held answers. "My father borrowed money to expand the farm. He thought we could grow more, sell more, make a better life. But the summer was too dry and the winter too harsh. The crops failed 2 years running. When he died of fever that spring, the bank came for what was owed. My mother had passed years before, and I had no siblings. There was nothing left but debt and an empty house." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I could have married Thomas Hendricks," he offered. "He has a store in town and would have paid off the debt, but I could not do it. He was not a bad man, but when I looked at him, all I saw was a life of settling, of always wondering what else might have been out there." "So you came west," Vincent said. "So I came west," she agreed. "Looking for honest work and maybe a place where I could build something of my own, even if it is just peace of mind. What about you? How did you end up here with all this land?" Vincent leaned back in his chair, the memories both sweet and painful. "My parents homesteaded this land when I was just a boy. We built it up together, all 3 of us. They taught me everything about running a ranch, about the value of hard work and fair dealing. 5 years ago, influenza swept through the territory. They both got sick within days of each other. I tried everything, rode for the doctor in Alta, but by the time he came, it was too late." He swallowed hard. "I have been running this place alone since then. Hired help comes and goes, but most do not last. It is lonely work." "It does not have to be," Theresa said softly. The words hung between them, loaded with possibility. Vincent felt his heart hammering in his chest, torn between the longing to reach across the table and take her hand and the fear of ruining the best thing that had happened to his ranch in years. The storm made the decision for them. A massive crack of thunder shook the house, followed immediately by a splintering crash from somewhere outside. Vincent and Theresa rushed to the window, peering out into the darkness illuminated by lightning. One of the old cottonwood trees near the barn had been struck, a large branch now lying across the fence of the horse corral. "The horses will panic," Theresa said, already moving toward the door. "Wait." Vincent grabbed his reins slicker and another for her. "We go together. It is too dangerous out there alone." They fought their way through the storm to the corral, where Vincent's 3 horses were indeed spooked by the fallen branch and the continuing thunder. Working in tandem without needing to speak, Vincent and Theresa managed to calm the animals and move them to a safer section of the corral away from the damage. By the time they finished, they were both exhausted and soaked through again despite the slickers. Back in the house, Theresa started shivering. Vincent built up the fire in the hearth and brought her a blanket, his concern overriding his usual propriety. "You need to get out of those wet clothes. I will find something of mine you can wear while these dry." He returned with one of his old shirts and a pair of work pants that would be too large but serviceable. Theresa took them gratefully and disappeared into his room to change. When she emerged, swimming in his clothes with the sleeves and pant legs rolled up, Vincent felt something shift irrevocably in his chest. She looked vulnerable and strong all at once, and beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fine dresses or careful presentation. "Thank you," she said, settling near the fire, "for all of this. You have been kinder to me than you had any obligation to be." Vincent sat across from her, the firelight dancing between them. "Theresa, I need to be honest with you about something." She looked at him with those deep brown eyes, and he felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, about to either fly or fall. "When you rode up to my ranch that morning, I knew I should probably send you on your way. A woman alone, a man alone, people talk. But there was something in your eyes that made me want to say yes before I even heard what you were asking. These past weeks, working alongside you, sharing meals and conversation, I have realized why." He paused, gathering courage. "I am falling in love with you. Maybe I have been since that first moment. I know this is not proper, and I know you came here looking for work, not for a man to complicate things. But I could not let another day pass without you knowing the truth." The silence that followed felt eternal. Theresa's expression was unreadable in the shifting light, and Vincent felt his heart sinking, certain he had just destroyed the best partnership he had ever known. Then she smiled, soft and genuine and full of relief. "Vincent, I thought I was the only one feeling this way. I have been trying so hard to focus on the work, to prove myself valuable, while fighting the urge to find excuses to be near you. When you laugh at something I say, my whole day feels brighter. When our hands accidentally brush passing tools, I feel it for hours afterward. I came here looking for honest work, but I found something I was not even looking for. I found you." Vincent crossed the space between them in 2 strides, dropping to his knees beside her chair. He took her hands in his, feeling the calluses that matched his own, the strength and the gentleness both. "Theresa Vance, I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I am certain of this feeling in a way I have never been certain of anything." "I am certain too," she whispered. And then she was leaning forward and he was rising to meet her, and their lips touched with the inevitability of rain falling and rivers flowing to the sea. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, learning the shape and taste of each other. Then it deepened, weeks of longing and restraint falling away. Vincent cupped her face in his hands, feeling her fingers tangle in his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said. "Not in the cabin, here, with me. Marry me, Theresa. Build this life with me as my wife, my partner, my love." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." The storm continued through the night, but inside the warm house, Vincent and Theresa built their own shelter. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams, stealing kisses between words, learning the geography of this new country they were exploring together. When exhaustion finally claimed them, Vincent gave Theresa his bed while he took the settee near the fire, both of them wanting to do this properly despite the unconventional circumstances. The morning broke clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Vincent woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, finding Theresa in the kitchen still wearing his oversized clothes, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked up when she heard him, her smile radiant. "Good morning," she said. "I hope you are hungry." "Starving," he replied, but he was looking at her, not the food. They spent the morning clearing the fallen branch and repairing the fence, working side by side as they had for weeks, but now with the freedom to touch, to exchange knowing looks, to steal quick kisses when the impulse struck. The physical labor felt different now, like they were building something together rather than just maintaining what existed. That afternoon, they rode into Alta together. The town was small, just one main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a bank, and a scattering of other businesses. The post office doubled as the telegraph office, and the schoolhouse sat at the far end of town. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business, which made Vincent's next step both necessary and daunting. They tied their horses outside the church and found Reverend Samuel Morrison in his study, preparing for Sunday's sermon. The Reverend was a weathered man in his 50s, with kind eyes and a practical demeanor that Vincent had always appreciated. "Vincent," the Reverend greeted him warmly, then looked with curiosity at Theresa. "And who is this, Reverend Morrison?" "This is Theresa Vance. She has been working at my ranch for the past few weeks." Vincent took a breath. "We are here because we want to be married, as soon as it can be arranged properly." The Reverend's eyebrows rose, but his expression remained kind. "That is wonderful news, though I confess it is rather sudden. Miss Vance, are you certain about this?" "I would be happy to speak with you privately if you have any concerns." Theresa met his gaze steadily. "Thank you, Reverend, but I am certain. I know how this must look, but Vincent is a good man, and what I feel for him is real and true. I have never been more sure of anything in my life." Reverend Morrison studied them both for a long moment, then nodded. "I can see that what you have is genuine. However, propriety must be observed. Miss Vance, you cannot continue living on the ranch unchaperoned before the marriage. Mrs. Henderson, the widow who runs the boarding house, would be happy to have you as a guest for a few weeks, I am sure. We will post the banns as required and hold the ceremony 3 weeks from this Sunday. That will give the community time to adjust to the news and for you both to be certain this is what you want." Vincent wanted to protest the delay, but he knew the Reverend was right. They needed to do this properly, both for Theresa's reputation and for their standing in the community. "That sounds fair. Thank you, Reverend." Arrangements were made quickly. Mrs. Henderson, a cheerful woman in her 60s who had been widowed during the Civil War, was delighted to have Theresa as a guest. The boarding house was comfortable and respectable, and several other single women lived there as well, working as a teacher, a seamstress, and a cook at the hotel. The separation was harder than Vincent had anticipated. After just one night of knowing they belonged together, going back to sleeping alone felt wrong. But they made the most of it. Vincent found excuses to come into town nearly every day, officially to buy supplies or handle business, but really just to see Theresa. They would walk together through the town, always properly chaperoned by Mrs. Henderson or one of the other ladies, talking about their plans for the ranch and their future together. Theresa used the time to make herself a proper wedding dress, working in the evenings with the seamstress from the boarding house. She also got to know the women of Alta, slowly being accepted into their community. There was gossip, of course. Some whispered about the speed of the courtship, about a woman alone showing up at a bachelor's ranch. But Theresa held her head high, and Vincent made sure everyone knew how proud he was to have her as his soon-to-be wife. The 3 weeks felt like 3 years, but they also passed in a blur of preparation. Vincent used the time to fix up the house, making repairs he had long neglected and adding small touches he thought Theresa might like. He built a bookshelf for the parlor and fixed the squeaky hinge on the bedroom door. He even attempted to make new curtains, though he had to sheepishly ask Mrs. Henderson for help when his stitching proved hopelessly inadequate. Finally, the wedding day arrived. The church was full, the entire community of Alta and the surrounding ranches turning out for the ceremony. Vincent stood at the altar in his best suit, the one he wore maybe twice a year, his heart pounding as he waited. Then Theresa appeared at the back of the church, and the rest of the world fell away. Her dress was simple but beautiful, made from cream-colored fabric with lace at the collar and sleeves. Her dark hair was pinned up with a few loose curls framing her face, and she carried a small bouquet of late-season wildflowers. But it was her eyes that held him, full of love and certainty and joy. Mrs. Henderson walked with her down the aisle, standing in for the family Theresa no longer had. When they reached the altar, the older woman placed Theresa's hand in Vincent's and whispered, "Take good care of her." "I will," Vincent promised, and he meant it with everything he had. Reverend Morrison led them through the traditional ceremony, the words washing over Vincent in a blur of emotion. He focused on Theresa, on the warmth of her hand in his, on the tears shining in her eyes that matched the ones he was trying to blink away. "Do you, Vincent Thomas Garrett, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do," Vincent said, his voice strong and clear. "And do you, Theresa Marie Vance, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do," Theresa answered, her voice trembling with emotion. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming and in the sight of God and this community, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Vincent, you may kiss your bride." Vincent cupped Theresa's face gently, mindful of their audience, and kissed her with all the love and promise he could convey in that single moment. The church erupted in applause and cheers, but he barely heard it over the rushing of blood in his ears, and the knowledge that this incredible woman was now his wife. The celebration that followed was held at the church hall, the community coming together with food and music and well wishes. Vincent danced with his bride, holding her close, still hardly believing this was real. She laughed as he spun her, her joy infectious, and he found himself laughing too, feeling lighter than he had in years. As the sun began to set, they made their exit amid more cheers and good-natured teasing. Vincent had borrowed a buggy for the occasion, decorating it with ribbons and flowers. He helped Theresa up onto the seat, then took his place beside her, snapping the reins to start the horses moving. The ride back to the ranch felt like traveling toward the rest of their lives. Theresa leaned against Vincent's shoulder and he wrapped one arm around her, steering with the other. The Wyoming sky blazed with orange and pink and gold, a glorious backdrop to their happiness. "Are you happy?" Vincent asked softly. "Happier than I knew I could be," Theresa replied. "When I rode up to your ranch that morning, I was so desperate, so afraid that I would be turned away like I had been at every other place. I never imagined I would find not just work but a home, a partner, a love that fills me completely." "I was so lonely before you came," Vincent admitted. "I did not even realize how lonely until you were there, and suddenly everything felt different. The work was still hard, but it felt like it meant something more. The house was still the same, but it felt like a home again. You brought light back into my life, Theresa." By the time they reached the ranch, night had fallen. Stars scattered across the vast sky like diamonds on velvet. Vincent had left lamps burning in the windows, and the house glowed with welcoming warmth. He lifted Theresa down from the buggy, then swept her up into his arms. "Vincent, what are you doing?" she laughed. "Carrying my bride over the threshold," he said, climbing the steps to the porch. "It is tradition." "Well, in that case, I suppose I should not protest." She wrapped her arms around his neck, trusting him completely. He carried her inside, kicking the door shut behind them, and set her down gently in the middle of the parlor. The house looked different than when she had last been there. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, and new cushions adorned the chairs. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the table was set with the good china that had been his mother's. "Vincent, it is beautiful," Theresa said, touching the embroidered tablecloth with reverent fingers. "I wanted our first night as husband and wife to be special. I made dinner, or attempted to. It is probably nothing compared to your cooking, but I wanted to do this for you." They ate together by candlelight, a simple meal of roast chicken and vegetables that Vincent had nervously prepared that morning, but the food hardly mattered. They were too caught up in each other, in the knowledge that this was just the first of thousands of meals they would share, the beginning of a lifetime of coming together at the end of each day. After dinner, Vincent took Theresa's hand and led her to the bedroom. He had made the bed with fresh linens and placed wildflowers in a jar on the dresser. Moonlight streamed through the window, painting everything in silver. They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies with the same care they had learned each other's hearts. Vincent worshipped every inch of her skin, committing each sound and sigh to memory. Theresa matched him touch for touch, kiss for kiss, both of them pouring years of loneliness and longing into this union that was finally, rightfully theirs. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Theresa's head on Vincent's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. The window was open slightly, letting in the cool night breeze and the sounds of the ranch settling down for sleep. "I love you," Vincent murmured into her hair. "I will never get tired of saying it." "I love you too," Theresa replied, pressing a kiss to his chest. "Thank you for seeing me that day, for giving me a chance when you had no reason to trust me." "I saw honest eyes looking for honest work," Vincent said. "And I found honest love looking back at me. That is all the reason I needed." The days that followed settled into a beautiful rhythm. They worked the ranch together, true partners in every sense. Theresa proved invaluable during the autumn roundup, helping Vincent drive the cattle and separate out those to be sold. Her way with animals and her tireless work ethic made jobs that had seemed insurmountable with one person manageable with two. But it was more than just the work. It was the way they moved around each other in the kitchen, passing plates and utensils with the ease of long practice. The way they fell into bed exhausted each night and reached for each other anyway, needing that connection more than they needed sleep. The way they sat on the porch in the evenings, Vincent in the rocking chair and Theresa perched on the railing, talking about everything and nothing while the sun painted the sky. Winter came early that year, snow falling in late October and not letting up. They were snowed in for days at a time, but neither minded. The house stayed warm, the animals were safe in the barn, and they had each other. Vincent taught Theresa to play chess on the board that had been his father's, and she taught him songs from her childhood that they sang while doing chores. In December, Theresa woke one morning feeling ill. At first she thought it was something she had eaten, but when the nausea persisted for several days, always worst in the morning, a different possibility occurred to her. She waited another week to be sure before telling Vincent, wanting to be certain before getting his hopes up. She chose a snowy evening after a particularly satisfying dinner. They were sitting by the fire, Vincent reading from a novel while Theresa worked on knitting a scarf. She set down her needles, suddenly nervous despite knowing he would be thrilled. "Vincent, I have something to tell you." He looked up immediately, attuned to every shift in her tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." The book fell from Vincent's hands, forgotten. His face went through a series of expressions, shock and disbelief and joy all fighting for dominance. Then he was across the room, pulling her up from her chair and into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he breathed. "Theresa, are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor confirming it. All the signs are there. I think the baby will come sometime in July." Vincent pulled back just enough to look at her face, his eyes shining with tears. "I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents." "Oh God, Theresa, you have made me the happiest man alive." He kissed her then, deep and long and full of wonder. When they broke apart, he immediately began fussing, insisting she sit back down, offering to get her water or tea or anything she needed. Theresa laughed at his sudden overprotectiveness, but found it endearing. "I am pregnant, not made of porcelain," she teased. "I can still work and move and live my life. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." I know, but you are carrying our child. Let me take care of you." The winter months passed with Vincent being increasingly protective and Theresa growing increasingly round. They made plans for the baby, turning the small room off their bedroom into a nursery. Vincent built a cradle with his own hands, sanding it until it was smooth as silk, carving their initials into the headboard. Theresa sewed blankets and tiny clothes, marveling at how small everything was. The snow melted in March, revealing the greening grass beneath. Spring brought new calves and new life all around the ranch, a perfect mirror of the life growing inside Theresa. Her belly swelled until she could no longer see her feet, and Vincent took over all the heavier chores, refusing to let her lift anything substantial. In May, they had a scare when Theresa slipped on the wet porch steps and fell. Vincent found her lying at the bottom, clutching her belly and crying. Terror flooded through him as he carefully lifted her and carried her inside, sending for the doctor in Alta despite the muddy roads. Dr. Jameson arrived 3 hours later, his horse and buggy splattered with spring mud. He examined Theresa thoroughly while Vincent paced in the kitchen, wearing a path in the floor. Finally, the doctor emerged. "She is fine and the baby is fine. No bleeding, no signs of distress. She was lucky. But she needs to rest for the next few days. Take it easy. No more walking on wet surfaces, and someone needs to fix those porch steps." Vincent nearly collapsed with relief. He spent the rest of the day at Theresa's bedside, holding her hand and thanking God she was all right. He fixed the porch steps the next morning, along with every other potential hazard he could find around the ranch, June brought hot weather and Theresa's increasing discomfort. She was huge now, the baby sitting heavy and low. She moved slowly, often pressing her hands to her lower back and grimacing. Vincent did everything he could to ease her discomfort, drawing cool baths and rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings. "I feel like I have been pregnant forever," Theresa complained one particularly hot afternoon, fanning herself on the porch. "How can it possibly be another month? You are beautiful," Vincent assured her, kissing her damp forehead. "Absolutely glowing with life and beauty." "I am sweating and swollen and I cannot see my feet," she retorted, but she was smiling. "But thank you for the kind lies." The baby came 2 weeks early, on a sweltering July afternoon when thunderclouds were building on the horizon. Theresa's water broke while she was hanging laundry, soaking her skirt and sending Vincent into a controlled panic. He had been prepared for this, had planned what to do, but now that it was actually happening, his mind went blank. "Vincent." Theresa's calm voice cut through his paralysis. "We need Mrs. Henderson. Ride to town and bring her back. I will be fine until you return." "I cannot leave you," he protested. "The baby is not coming in the next hour. First babies take time. Go quickly so you can be back before things really start." Vincent rode faster than he ever had, making the trip to Alta in half the usual time. He found Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house and explained the situation in a rush of words. The widow calmly collected her things, having assisted at many births over the years, and climbed up onto Vincent's horse while he took her buggy for the medical supplies she kept there. They made it back to the ranch, just as Theresa's contractions were intensifying. Mrs. Henderson took charge immediately, shooing Vincent out of the bedroom and getting Theresa settled. Vincent paced in the parlor, flinching every time he heard Theresa cry out, wanting desperately to be with her, but knowing he would only be in the way. Hours passed. The storm that had been threatening finally broke, rain hammering the roof and lightning splitting the sky. Vincent thought of that first storm, when he and Theresa had admitted their feelings, and prayed that this storm would also bring something beautiful into his life. Finally, as night fell and the storm began to ease, Vincent heard the sound he had been waiting for. A baby's cry, strong and loud and perfect. He was on his feet immediately, but Mrs. Henderson appeared in the doorway before he could rush past her. "You have a son," she said, smiling. "A big, healthy boy, and Theresa did wonderfully. She is tired but well. Give me just a moment to finish cleaning them both up and then you can come in." A son. Vincent felt tears running down his face, unashamed of them. A son. An heir to carry on the ranch, to learn everything Vincent could teach him, to grow up surrounded by love and wide open spaces. Mrs. Henderson opened the door wider, beckoning him in. Vincent entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Theresa was propped up against the pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in one of the blankets she had made. She looked up as he approached, her smile tired but full of joy. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Vincent sat on the edge of the bed, hardly daring to breathe as Theresa placed the baby in his arms. He looked down at the tiny face, the miniature fingers curled against the blanket, the dark hair so like his own. The baby's eyes opened, unfocused but seeming to look right at him, and Vincent felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered. "Absolutely perfect. Theresa, you are amazing. Thank you. Thank you for this gift for our son." "We made him together," Theresa said, reaching out to touch the baby's cheek. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the winter but had not settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Vincent knew exactly what felt right. Thomas Vincent Garrett. "After both our fathers and our family, if that suits you." Thomas, Theresa repeated, testing the name. Yes, that is perfect. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little one. You are so loved already. Mrs. Henderson stayed for 3 days, helping with the new baby and making sure Theresa recovered well. She taught Vincent how to change diapers and swaddle Thomas properly, laughing at his initial clumsiness. By the time she left, Vincent felt more confident, though still amazed that he was responsible for this tiny human life. The summer passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and growing fast. Vincent found himself constantly checking on him, watching him sleep, marveling at every small change. Theresa recovered her strength and settled into motherhood with the same capable grace she brought to everything else. They worked out a new rhythm for the ranch, trading off baby duties so they could both still contribute to the work. Vincent wore Thomas in a sling against his chest while doing lighter chores, talking to him constantly, explaining about the cattle and the land and the legacy he would inherit. Theresa nursed him in the shade of the porch in the hot afternoons, humming the same songs she had taught Vincent. In August, they took Thomas to Alta for the first time, showing him off to the community that had welcomed them. Mrs. Henderson cried when she held him, and Reverend Morrison blessed him in the church. The women of Alta cooed over him and brought gifts, and Vincent felt his family expanding to include the entire town. That winter was harder, with a baby to care for and the extra worry of keeping him warm and healthy. But Thomas thrived, growing chubby and happy. He smiled at 6 months, laughed at 7, and by his first birthday in July, he was pulling himself up on furniture and showing signs that he would walk soon. They celebrated his birthday with a small party, inviting some of the neighboring ranchers and their families, along with friends from Alta. Vincent watched Theresa help Thomas smash his tiny cake, both of them covered in frosting, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This life they had built, this family they had created, was more than he had ever dared to dream. The years that followed brought changes and growth. Thomas did learn to walk, then to run, always into everything and keeping them constantly on their toes. He learned to talk, his first word Dada to Vincent's immense pride and Theresa's mock indignation. He became obsessed with the horses, toddling after them in the pasture until Vincent fashioned him a small saddle and taught him to ride. When Thomas was 3, Theresa became pregnant again. This time there was less worry and more excitement, the process familiar if still profound. In the spring of 1883, they welcomed a daughter into the world, a tiny girl with Theresa's dark eyes and delicate features. They named her Sarah Marie, after Theresa's mother, and with Marie from Theresa's own middle name. Thomas was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. He would bring her toys and sing to her in his piping voice, making up songs when he could not remember the real words. Sarah adored him from the start, her eyes following him around the room, crying when he left her sight. The ranch continued to prosper. With 2 able-bodied adults working it and growing success selling cattle, Vincent was able to hire help again. This time he was more careful, employing a young married couple, James and Martha Dalton, who lived in the foreman's cabin and became trusted friends as well as employees. James handled much of the heavy labor, while Martha helped Theresa with the house and children when needed. In 1885, Alta got a railroad spur, connecting the town to the larger networks east and west. The celebration was huge, with nearly every resident turning out to see the first train arrive. Vincent stood with Theresa and their children, Thomas now 7 and Sarah 2, watching the locomotive pull in with a sense of the world growing both bigger and smaller at once. "Things are changing," Theresa said, holding Sarah on her hip while Thomas bounced excitedly beside them. "They are," Vincent agreed. "But some things stay the same. The land, the work, us. That will not change." And it did not. Through the years that followed, as Wyoming moved from territory to statehood in 1890, as Thomas grew into a capable young man, and Sarah into a bright, adventurous girl, as new challenges and opportunities arose, Vincent and Theresa remained constant. Their love, forged in those early days of honest work and honest eyes, only deepened with time. They added to their family once more in 1887, another son they named James Edward after Theresa's father. 3 children filled the house with noise and life and laughter, exactly as Vincent had always hoped it would be. The ranch expanded, and they built a new, larger house while keeping the original as a guest house for when James and Martha needed more space or for visitors from town. Thomas showed a natural talent for ranching, learning everything Vincent could teach him and then some. He was the first up in the mornings and the last in at night, devoted to the land and the animals in a way that made Vincent's chest swell with pride. Sarah proved to be academically gifted, devouring every book she could get her hands on and eventually going to the newly formed University of Wyoming, one of the first women to attend. James, the baby, was creative and mechanical, always taking things apart to see how they worked and putting them back together better than before. Vincent and Theresa watched their children grow with the bittersweet knowledge that their job was to raise them to leave, to make their own marks on the world. But they also knew that the foundation they had built, the love and security they had provided, would keep their children tethered to home no matter how far they roamed. In 1898, when Vincent was 46 and Theresa 42, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party that drew people from 3 counties. The ranch was prosperous, their children were thriving, and they still looked at each other with the same love and wonder that had sparked that day in the rain so many years ago. That night, after the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Vincent and Theresa sat on their porch, watching the stars wheel overhead. The Wyoming night was huge and clear. The Milky Way splashed across the darkness like spilled cream. "Do you ever think about that day I rode up to your ranch?" Theresa asked, leaning against Vincent's shoulder. "All the time," Vincent admitted. "I think about how close I came to sending you away, how different my life would be if I had, how empty." "I was so desperate that day," Theresa said quietly. "So afraid and alone. I had been traveling for months, getting rejected at every turn, running out of money and hope. Your ranch was going to be my last stop before I gave up entirely and tried to find work in a saloon or worse. And then you looked at me, really looked at me and said yes." Vincent tightened his arm around her. "I saw honest eyes looking for honest work, and I found so much more than I ever expected. You saved me too, you know." I was slowly dying inside, going through the motions of living but not really alive. You brought me back to life. "We saved each other," Theresa said. She turned to look up at him, and in her eyes Vincent saw everything they had built together. 20 years, 3 children, countless sunrises and sunsets, and I love you more today than I did on our wedding day. How is that possible?" "Because love is not static," Vincent said, cupping her face in his hand. "It grows and changes and deepens. Every challenge we face together, every joy we share, every moment of connection and understanding adds another layer. I love you more today, too, and I will love you even more tomorrow." They kissed under the Wyoming stars, still as passionate as they had been 2 decades earlier, still as certain that they belonged together. Around them, the ranch settled into sleep, the cattle lowing softly in the distance, the horses nickering in their stalls, the house full of their sleeping children. Everything they had worked for, everything they had built, everything they were. The new century arrived with celebration and some trepidation. The world was changing rapidly, technology advancing in ways that seemed both miraculous and frightening. But on the ranch, the rhythms remained largely the same. Cattle still needed tending, fences still needed mending, crops still needed planting. The work was hard, but it was good, and it was theirs. Thomas married at 23, wedding a rancher's daughter from across the valley. They built a house on the far side of the property, and Thomas began taking over more of the ranch management, though Vincent remained active and involved. Sarah finished university and became a teacher, though she eventually returned to Alta to open a school for girls. James, mechanical genius that he was, opened a workshop in town, repairing farm equipment and building innovations that made ranching easier. Vincent and Theresa, entering their 50s, found themselves with more time to simply be together. They took long rides across the property, revisiting favorite spots and making new memories. They sat on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set over the land they had built their lives on. They traveled occasionally, taking the train to Denver or Cheyenne, seeing the world beyond their valley but always eager to return home. Grandchildren arrived, Thomas and his wife giving them 2 granddaughters and a grandson. The house filled with young voices again, and Vincent discovered that being a grandfather was a whole new kind of joy. He taught his grandchildren to ride, just as he had taught their father, and told them stories about the old days, when the West was still wild and anything seemed possible. Through it all, Vincent never forgot that day in September 1878, when a dust-covered woman on a tired horse rode up to his ranch looking for honest work. That moment had changed everything, had set him on a path he had not even known existed. He had been given the gift of Theresa, and through her, the gift of family, of love, of a life richer and fuller than he could have imagined. In the spring of 1908, Vincent and Theresa celebrated their 30th anniversary. They were 56 and 52 respectively, still healthy and active though their hair was graying and wrinkles lined their faces. The party was smaller this time, just family and close friends, but no less meaningful. Their children toasted them, speaking of the example they had set, the love they had demonstrated, the legacy they had built. Thomas talked about learning what it meant to be a good husband by watching his father love his mother. Sarah spoke of her mother's strength and independence, how Theresa had shown her that a woman could be both a partner and her own person. James, ever the emotional one, cried as he thanked them for giving him a childhood full of love and security. When it came time for Vincent to speak, he stood with Theresa's hand in his, looking around at the gathered faces of everyone they loved. 30 years ago, I married the woman of my dreams. But more than that, I married my best friend, my partner, the other half of my soul. Theresa came to my ranch looking for honest work, and I found honest love in her eyes. That love has sustained me through every challenge, celebrated with me in every joy, and given my life meaning beyond measure. Here is to 30 more years, my love, and to the adventure we are still living together. They raised their glasses and drank, and Vincent kissed his wife to the cheers and applause of their family. In that moment, surrounded by the people and the life they had built together, Vincent felt complete. The scared, lonely rancher he had been was gone, replaced by a man rich in all the ways that mattered. The years continued to pass, bringing the inevitable challenges of aging but also the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Vincent's joints grew stiff, and Theresa's hair turned silver, but they remained devoted to each other and to the ranch. They gradually turned over more responsibilities to Thomas and the hired hands, content to be advisors rather than primary operators. In 1915, Sarah married as well to a professor from the university. They settled in Laramie but visited frequently, always bringing stacks of books for Theresa and Vincent to read. James, ever the bachelor, remained focused on his work, though he had a lady friend in town that everyone suspected would become more serious eventually. The Great War in Europe seemed distant from their Wyoming valley, but it touched them when several young men from Alta enlisted. They sent care packages and prayed for their safe return, grateful that their own sons were past the age of conscription. The world was changing in ways they had never anticipated, the 20th century bearing little resemblance to the 19th in which they had built their lives. But on the ranch, some things remained eternal. The seasons turned, the cattle grazed, the wind blew across the grasslands. Vincent and Theresa, now in their 60s, spent more time simply enjoying each other's company. They took walks in the early evening, Vincent's steps slower but steady, Theresa sometimes using a walking stick when her knees bothered her. "You have any regrets?" Theresa asked one autumn evening in 1920. They were sitting on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Vincent considered the question seriously. "I regret that I could not give you an easier life. The work was hard, especially in those early years. I regret every time you were scared or hurt or worried. But the life itself, the choice to say yes when you asked for work, the choice to marry you, not for a single second. You. My only regret is that we could not have more time," Theresa said softly. "That we will not be young again, starting out with our whole lives ahead of us. But I would not trade a single moment of the time we have had. Even the hard parts, they were worth it because we faced them together." Vincent reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining automatically after all these years. "We still have time, my love. I plan to be around to annoy you for many more years." "I certainly hope so," Theresa said, squeezing his hand. "I've grown rather accustomed to having you around." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the yard, causing their grandchildren to look up and smile. Even the youngest ones could sense the love between their grandparents, the solid foundation it provided for the entire family. In 1923, Vincent fell ill with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. Theresa nursed him through it with the same determination she brought to everything, refusing to let him give up even when he felt too tired to fight. Dr. Jameson, ancient now and only practicing part-time, visited regularly, but it was Theresa's care that pulled Vincent through. When he finally recovered, weak and thinner but alive, Vincent held his wife and cried. "I am not ready to leave you," he said into her hair. "I cannot imagine any existence without you in it." "Then do not leave," Theresa said firmly. "Stay with me. We have more sunrises to see, more grandchildren to meet, more life to live." And so he did. Vincent regained his strength slowly, determined not to miss any more time with Theresa than necessary. They celebrated his 71st birthday that summer with the whole family, 4 generations now gathered around their table. Vincent looked at Theresa across the crowd of loved ones and felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the life they had built. In 1925, James finally married his lady friend, a widow with 2 children of her own. The wedding was joyful, and Vincent and Theresa gained 2 more grandchildren in the process, fully embracing James's stepchildren as their own. The family continued to grow and expand, branches spreading from the strong trunk Vincent and Theresa had established. They marked their 50-year anniversary in 1928, an achievement that drew newspaper reporters from Cheyenne. Vincent and Theresa, now 76 and 72, posed for photographs on their porch, still holding hands, still looking at each other with love clear in their eyes. The reporter asked them the secret to such a long and happy marriage. Vincent looked at Theresa, letting her answer first as he always did. She smiled, that same genuine smile that had captured his heart half a century before. The secret is simple. We chose each other every single day. Not just on our wedding day, but every morning when we woke up and every evening when we went to bed. We chose to love, to forgive, to laugh, to work together. Marriage is not a single choice, but 1,000 small choices made over and over. And I never regretted a single one of those choices, Vincent added. From the moment Theresa rode up to my ranch looking for honest work, I found honest love in her eyes. That love has been the guiding light of my life, the foundation of everything good I have built. 50 years later, I am still in love with her, still grateful for every day we have together. The article ran in papers across Wyoming and even picked up by some eastern publications. For a few weeks, they were minor celebrities, receiving letters from couples seeking advice and well-wishers congratulating them. But the attention faded, and they returned to the peaceful rhythm of their lives, content to be known only to those who loved them. The Great Depression that began in 1929 was hard on everyone, but the ranch survived. Having a working cattle operation and the ability to grow their own food insulated them from the worst of it, though they saw the suffering in Alta and helped where they could. Theresa organized food drives, and Vincent hired men from town for odd jobs just to put money in their pockets, remembering his own desperation for honest work and wanting to offer others the same chance he had been given. Through the hard years of the early 1930s, Vincent and Theresa remained pillars of their community. Though they were slowing down, their minds remained sharp and their love undimmed. They held their great-grandchildren, marveling at the continuation of their legacy, the ripples spreading out from that single decision to say yes to a desperate woman on a dusty horse so many years ago. In the summer of 1935, Vincent woke one morning and knew with certainty that his time was growing short. He was 83 now, ancient by any standard, and his body was simply wearing out. He said nothing to Theresa, not wanting to worry her, but she knew. After 57 years together, they could read each other like well-loved books. "Talk to me," she said that evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Tell me what you are thinking." Vincent took her hand, so familiar in his, the landscape of her fingers and palm as known to him as his own. "I am thinking about how grateful I am, how blessed. I have lived a life beyond my wildest dreams, and it is all because you rode up to my ranch that September day. You were looking for honest work, and you gave me honest love. You gave me everything." Theresa's eyes filled with tears. "You gave me everything too. A home, a family, a love that sustained me through every challenge. I was so lost before I found you, Vincent. You were my salvation." "We saved each other," Vincent said, echoing words they had spoken many times over the years. "And we built something beautiful together. Look at all of this." He gestured to the ranch spread out before them, to the house full of family, to the land they had tended for nearly 6 decades. "This is our legacy. Not just the ranch or the children, but the love we shared and the example we set. That will outlive us both." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Vincent felt a deep peace settling over him, the knowledge that he had lived fully and loved completely. Whatever came next, he would face it without regrets. He lived through that summer and into the fall, each day a gift he unwrapped slowly. Thomas had taken over all ranch operations now, and Vincent was content to simply observe, to offer advice when asked, but mostly to enjoy watching his son work the land he had built. Sarah visited weekly with her husband, bringing books and conversation. James came by nearly every day, often just to sit with his father and talk. In late October, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Vincent took a turn for the worse. The family gathered, everyone knowing without being told that this was the end. Theresa stayed by his side constantly, holding his hand, talking to him in a soft voice, reminding him of all their years together. On his last night, when everyone else had finally gone to rest in other parts of the house, Vincent opened his eyes to find Theresa sitting beside his bed, still keeping vigil. He squeezed her hand weakly, summoning the strength to speak. "My love," he whispered. "My Theresa. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for every day, every moment. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." "And you to me," Theresa said, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Vincent. I will always love you." "I will find you again," Vincent promised. "Wherever we go next, I will find you. This is not the end of us." "I know," Theresa said, kissing his forehead. "I will be waiting." Vincent closed his eyes, Theresa's hand warm in his, and let go. His last thought was of a September morning long ago, of a woman on a tired horse asking for honest work, of the moment he looked into her eyes and found his future staring back at him. Theresa felt him leave, felt the absence of his spirit even though his body remained. She stayed with him through the night, holding his hand, talking to him, saying all the things she needed to say. When dawn broke, she finally let Thomas and the others come in, let them see that their father was gone. The funeral was 3 days later, the church packed with everyone whose lives Vincent had touched over his 83 years. Theresa sat in the front pew, dry-eyed now, her grief too deep for public tears. She listened to the eulogies, to the stories of Vincent's kindness and integrity, of the life he had built and the love he had shared. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly, leaning on Sarah's arm. "Vincent Garrett was my husband for 57 years, she began, her voice clear despite her age. "But before he was my husband, he was a lonely young man working a ranch alone. And I was a desperate young woman with nothing but the clothes on my back and a prayer that someone would give me a chance. He looked past my circumstances and saw me. He gave me honest work, and I gave him honest love. Everything that came after, all the years and the children and the joy, it all started with that simple exchange, with him saying yes when he could have said no, with both of us choosing to take a chance on love." She paused, looking at the casket that held all that remained of the man she loved. "I will miss him every day for the rest of my life, but I will not regret our time together. We built something beautiful, something that will outlast us both, and that is the greatest gift anyone could ask for." Vincent was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, where he could watch over the land he had loved. Theresa visited his grave daily at first, then weekly as her own strength began to fail. She lived for 3 more years, staying in the house they had shared, surrounded by family and memories. She read the books Sarah brought her, held the great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, and told stories about Vincent to anyone who would listen. On a September morning in 1938, 60 years almost to the day after she had first ridden up to Vincent's ranch looking for work, Theresa passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 82 years old and had lived a full life. Her last words, spoken to Sarah the night before, were simply, "Tell him I am coming. Tell your father I will see him soon." They buried her beside Vincent on the hill, their graves marked by simple headstones that bore their names, dates, and a single inscription chosen by their children. She came looking for honest work. He found honest love in her eyes, Together they built a legacy that lives on. The ranch continued under Thomas's stewardship and eventually passed to his son. The house remained in the family, filled with new generations who grew up hearing stories about their great-great-grandparents who had built it all. The love story of Vincent and Theresa became family legend, told and retold, a reminder of what was possible when two people chose to take a chance on each other. And on quiet September mornings, when the light was just right and the wind whispered through the grass, those who worked the ranch swore they could sometimes see two figures walking together on the hill where they were buried, hand in hand, still choosing each other, even in eternity. The ranch prospered through the decades that followed, adapting to changes in technology and markets, while maintaining the core values Vincent and Theresa had established. Their great-grandchildren introduced modern ranching techniques while respecting the land and the legacy they had inherited. The house was carefully preserved, becoming a treasured family gathering place where multiple generations came together for holidays and celebrations. In the town of Alta, which grew modestly but steadily through the 20th century, a historical marker was eventually placed near the church where Vincent and Theresa were married. It told their story in brief, commemorating them as pioneers who had helped build the community. The boarding house where Theresa had stayed before the wedding was converted into a museum, with one room dedicated to their story, displaying photographs and artifacts from their life together. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren all carried forward the lessons learned from Vincent and Theresa's example. Thomas ran the ranch with the same integrity his father had shown, becoming a respected figure in Wyoming's ranching community before passing it to his own son. Sarah's school for girls eventually became part of Alta's public school system, but her dedication to education lived on through scholarships established in her name. James's mechanical innovations improved ranching throughout the region, and his workshop became a successful manufacturing business that employed dozens of people. But more than the material legacy, more than the land or the businesses or the money, what endured was the love. Every couple in the family heard the story of how Vincent and Theresa met, how a desperate woman looking for honest work had found honest love, and how that love had sustained them through 57 years of marriage. It became a touchstone, a reminder of what mattered most. On the 100th anniversary of their wedding in 1978, over 200 descendants gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The family had spread across the country by then, but they all came home for this occasion. They stood together on the hill where Vincent and Theresa were buried, 4 generations holding hands, and told stories late into the night. The young ones heard for the first time, or the 100th, how their ancestors had built this legacy. And they understood that they were part of something larger than themselves, connected across time by bonds of love and family. The original house still stood, carefully maintained, and the family gathered inside for a meal. As they ate and laughed and caught up on each other's lives, the spirit of Vincent and Theresa seemed to fill every corner. The love they had shared, the life they had built, the choices they had made, all of it lived on in the faces around the table, in the stories being told, in the connections being forged between cousins meeting for the first time. As the sun set that evening, the oldest living descendant, Vincent and Theresa's granddaughter, who was now 94 herself, stood to offer a toast. Her voice wavered with age but remained strong with conviction. To Vincent and Theresa, who taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice, made new every day. To honest work and honest love, and to all the blessings that flow from both. May we all be as lucky in love as they were, and may we honor their memory by living with the same integrity and devotion they showed us. to family, to legacy, and to love that endures beyond death itself. Glasses were raised, the toast was drunk, and somewhere in the gathering twilight, two souls who had never really been apart smiled down on the family they had created. The dust devil that had kicked up that September morning 100 years before had indeed been an omen, but not of trouble. It had been a herald of change, of love, of a destiny fulfilled. The ranch still operates today, in hands of yet another generation, and the story of Vincent and Theresa is still told. It has become more than family history. It is a testament to the power of taking chances, of looking past circumstances to see the person beneath, of building something lasting on a foundation of honest work and honest love. Their graves on the hill remain a place of pilgrimage for family members seeking connection to their roots, seeking inspiration for their own lives and loves. And so the legacy endures, not frozen in time but living and growing, adapting to new generations while maintaining its essential truth. Love is the most important work we do, the foundation on which all else is built. And sometimes, if we are very lucky and very brave, we find that honest love looking back at us from a pair of deep brown eyes, arriving when we need it most, changing everything, making all the difference. That was Vincent and Theresa's gift to each other and to all who came after. The knowledge that love, real and true and lasting, is always possible, always worth fighting for, always the best choice we can make. Their story, which began with a desperate request for work and a cowboy's willingness to take a chance, became a love for the ages, proof that sometimes the greatest adventures start with the simple courage to say yes.